Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this ADR Awareness Day Seminar. So, in a moment, I'll be running through the agenda and explain what we have planned for today. And during the course of the sessions, I'll be introduced to some of our fantastic panelists. But just in terms of a little bit of context, the ADR Awareness Day is an annual stakeholder engagement event, which is dedicated to raising awareness of the acceptability and trustworthiness of AI data and robotics technologies. So the event has been pulled together and organized by the Adra-e Project. And the seminar will bring together experts and stakeholders to explore the latest developments and initiatives aimed at fostering trust and ethics in AI applications. So in terms of the program for today, we are going to have a bit of a presentation on the ADRA Association by myself. Then we'll be moving into the Adra-e Project overview, and we'll have the coordinator join us there to give a presentation of the project itself and how it supports the community. And then we'll be moving into the presentations themselves on the AI Trust label, and you'll be introduced to each one of the panelists then, and after which we'll also be doing the AI Externalities, and you'll be introduced to those panelists as well. We'll have Edward Curry and Frederick Heinzer do the moderation for those two panels, and you'll be introduced to them momentarily. So at this point, I wanted to introduce the ADRA Association to everybody who's joining us. And so my name is Philip Katkovich, and I'm the Secretary General of the ADRA Association. Click. And what I want to do is give you a sense of what the association is here to do, how we work within the public-private partnership with the European Commission. And this presentation will look at 4 different themes, which are the challenges that kind of ADRA is faced in, and the AI data robotics communities are faced with, what's at stake, the journey that we want to take people on, and then a kind of encouraging signal for those stakeholders who aren't members to join us. Click. So Europe is currently at a bit of a crossroads. So the ongoing digital transformation in which AI plays a key role, and robotics and data technology play a key role, have triggered the global competition for tech leadership. So Europe is lagging, and unless it catches up with the major regions on key technologies, it's going to be vulnerable across all sectors of growth and competitiveness, comprising the region's relatively robust record on sustainability and inclusion. So currently outpaced by the US and China, policymakers are very concerned about these developments, and as a result, it poses challenges to political stability, kind of economic competitiveness of the region, and ensure that we offer safe and trustworthy technology systems. Click. So here are just a few examples of robotics installations, and you can see clearly that Europe is lagging the likes of Asia, and in fact we don't see that the adoption of those technologies accelerating in any way over the 3 years indicated here. Click. So Europe set itself very, very ambitious goals. And in fact, Europe's digital decade is an ambition to close the technology gap, the technology skills gap, and ensure that everyone can use and access those technologies. And so it's important because Europe has to capitalize on the market opportunity, and the technology that's being developed needs to also enshrine core European values. So those of where no one's left behind, where everybody enjoys freedom, protection, and fairness. And in fact, we need to encourage every small business to adopt and use the technology in order to make better decisions, interact with their customers, improve parts of the business, improve productivity. So this connectivity needs to reach people, also needs to reach people in the most remote parts of Europe and make sure that every European citizen benefits. Click. So this is, as I mentioned just briefly, this is because it has a massive impact on productivity. So this is just to give you an example of the application of AI technologies. So in an experiment done over 18 different tasks to be kind of realistic samples of the kind of works being done at a consultancy company, those using AI outperformed dramatically those that did not. So that's just, one example of where, we really need to press for the adoption of these technologies. And with something like AI and other general purpose technologies, in earlier instances, these technologies boosted the economic and geopolitical dominance of the pioneering country. So something like the steam engine that kind of symbolized the Industrial Revolution meant that industrial manufacturers were able to inundate handicraft industries in countries like China and India and rendered them uncompetitive, which caused in some instances for those per capita incomes to stagnate and even fall. So we're in a similar situation at the moment, and there's a big question around whether those AI technologies and the first mover like the United States, will that cement their position in that domain and their dominance economically. So the question here is, what do we risk if we don't achieve all of this? Click. And it's really, really simple. This is a picture of the current state of where Europe is, and Europe's in green here, in that kind of global context, and we risk being risk falling even further behind and see a landscape that is completely dominated by Chinese and US companies. Click. So if that wasn't enough, over the next few decades, Europe's going to need to deal with climate change, a demographic shift, a reduced career ratio, lower productivity, urbanization, global competition from China and the US as just presented. And this is all happening simultaneously. And that's without the impact of black swan events like the Ukraine war and COVID and the like. So we're facing really, really big challenges here. But on the flip side, some of these technologies hold great promise and immense potential to improve people's lives and significantly accelerate our efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and address some of these challenges, some of these climate challenges. So, this is one of the aspects that ADRA is also looking to respond to, the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's a part of the way that we feel that AI data and robotics technologies has a role to accelerate the response to some of these challenges. So I mentioned a few of them here: cleaning oceans, safe and autonomous driving, and smart agriculture. Click. Click. Great. So I've just presented the bear case for Europe, but there's because as we all know, kind of Europe is just home to a tenth of the world's privately held tech unicorns worth over 1 billion. Every year, roughly 3 times more is invested in US and China tech companies than Europe. Pretty much all of the key platforms that define the digital economy, search, social, mobile operating systems, are all controlled by US and Asian countries. But it's not lost, and it's really important that Europe kind of comes together now and acts to respond to these challenges. And we do have a competitive advantage in several instances, and ADRA is there to help leverage these comparative advantages. So I'm just going to run through them. So it's very likely in the next decade that the tech giants won't be platforms like Google and Facebook. They're going to be based on frontier technologies that Europe has a really good chance of developing. And something like generative AI may well better support the European market, both in terms of language and the cultural climate. Secondly, Europe has areas of innovation that are world-beating. So, for instance, public services around health, energy, and aerospace could be a basis for raising the global tech leadership here. And AI data robotics play, a central role in those sectors. So, thirdly, the European tech ecosystem is becoming increasingly more connected and supporting the attraction and retention of talent. And Adra, again, play a key role in coordinating and pooling those activities and talent. And finally, a positive trend that we're seeing is, Europe is gradually closing the funding gap from an investor point of view. So we see that gradually, Europe is closing the gap on private investment between the US and China, and it's becoming a more attractive hub to attract the skills and talent that are going to be the foundation for a solid AI data and robotics ecosystem. I think this is also it's also kind of complemented by the fact that consumer trends are changing in Europe. There's a rise in kind of purpose-driven tech in Europe, which is driven by kind of consumer and consumer trends and the priorities of founders changing as well. Click. So, in order to solve some of these challenges, and I tried to set the broader context here. ADRA is an initiative of 5 associations: BDVA, EURAI, Claire, Ellis, and Robotics, to come together and identify ways to align and confront these challenges. And there was a need to align public and private sector interests, so that we can leverage the potential of both sectors in the context of these global challenges. Click. And so therefore, ADRA is the private side of this public-private partnership. The European Commission has committed to invest 1.3 billion euros into research in the sector in its Horizon Europe program. And this means that it will launch around 200 projects focusing in these sectors. Around about 50 of them, I think, are running currently. And the purpose of this public investment is that it stimulates private side investment, and the expectation is that the private side will commit to the same amount in private funding. So it's a total of 2.3 billion. What's worth noting here is that it's only ADRA that is contracted to the Commission to deliver these aspects. Therefore, ADRA is the kind of official channel of speaking with our colleagues in the European Commission. Click. So as I mentioned, the companies of the next decade probably aren't going to look anything like Facebook or Google. So creating them is still up for grabs. And frontier technologies like robotics, big data, combined with the basic needs of healthcare, food, and finance are areas where, are all areas where Europe has significant expertise. So ADRA is here to support Europe as a whole to bounce back and take a leadership position in global tech. And we have 3 high-level priorities that we're looking at achieving. Those are securing European sovereignty in ADR, taking lead in technologies that impact the common good, and finally, that Europe succeeds in global competition in this area. Click. Our mission is to open the space to dialogue across all stakeholder groups that have an interest in AI data and robotics, and deliver a true public-private approach, because it's the one, our belief is that it's the only approach that's really going to work. And if we do it properly, it really is Europe's superpower. And our ability is to kind of pool the expertise and leverage these strengths. Then leverage these strengths is how we look to achieve some of these ambitions. So to make this possible, we try and attain a balance across disciplines, as well as between industry and research. And so this is reflected in the board's composition, which I'll show you in a later slide, but also in the way that we want to build upon existing stakeholder communities, most notably the founding organizations, but also stakeholders at member state level and regional level as well. Click. So I think, why join ADRA? I mean, you know, I've kind of laid it out previously, but it's about solving society's problems. It's about kind of that unique value, and ADRA is there to broker that cross-community dialogue. We want to put forward a unified voice on some of these issues and advocate for research in these areas and the industries involved with the organizations. We play a big role in establishing the research strategy, and again, I'll touch on this in a moment. But you know, ADRA feed into the development of the work programs, and we're currently looking at the work programs for 25, for 27, and establishing the kind of what we call the big ticket priorities there. And finally, it's about cultivating European thought leadership globally. You know, so it's not just a conversation amongst our communities here in Europe, which is obviously incredibly important, but it's about telling others around the world what ADRA is doing and how Europe is performing in these technologies, which I think it's fair to say, you know, sometimes we don't do a great job at. Click. So these are some of the big, value that we believe we deliver to kind of special target groups. We allow big industry to play a role in setting the strategy discussions, the conversations that we have internally within our topic groups help SMEs and startups to kind of enhance their products and services, speak to others, connect to some of our other members to, you know, look at potential new supply chains, market opportunities, working with our RTOs and industries, RTOs and universities. We help to shape Europe's research objectives, and you know, although we're currently looking at the work program for Horizon Europe, you know, conversations around FP10 have already kicked off. So we're looking at how to position ourselves and our members there. And finally, end users, public sector and NGOs. So ADRA supports end users, public sectors and NGOs in using ADR technologies. So we're there to help educate people on how to use the technologies, but how they're going to impact the development of society as a whole. Click. Just this is an indication of how we're working within our topic groups. So in the ADRA organization, we have specific domain groups. Some of them are horizontal, some of them vertical. They look at different aspects of ADR developments. And I'm not going to dive too deep into this right now, but I'm sure we'll be circulating the slides, so you'll be able to see who is leading on which group once you receive those. But, you know, a big part, click, of what we do is creating that sense of community in the AI, data and robotics sectors. And the topic groups help to stimulate those kind of working relationships on a slightly more kind of, in a slightly more technical context. And the AI Data and Robotics Forum, our big kind of upcoming community event on the 8th and 9th of November in Versailles, is that opportunity to help with networking across the sectors. It's there to help kind of stimulate conversations and listen to kind of some of the kind of bleeding edge thoughts and developments in AI data robotics. And we have, I'm pleased to say, a really star-studded set of speakers for that event. And if you haven't registered already, I would encourage everybody to do so. It's something that I think the entire community is really looking forward to. Click. So, I mean, I'm getting to the end of my presentation, but I did just want to introduce our board of directors. Some of them are actually present in the meeting today, and you'll get to hear from them a little bit later. But currently, Emanuele Girardi is our president, and in fact, they're all doing a really great job at promoting ADRA and communicating the impact of the association and some of our ambitions going forward. Click. So this is my final slide. I just wanted to finish with the vast majority of the members who are already a part of the AI Data and Robotics Association. I would just like to finish by saying, if you have an interest in working on some of the challenges and issues that I mentioned before, be very pleased to speak with you. We are always looking for new inputs, new members, new ideas to share with the community, and I'd encourage anybody who has an interest in working with us, just get in touch with me, and we can tell you about the next steps and process for joining. So on that point, I'm going to finish. Thank you very much. Click. You can see my contact details on the final slide. And like I said, I really make the time to speak to anybody who has an interest, and very happy to explain and or have a chat with you about the things that I mentioned today. Thank you. So Mark, I believe I am handing over to you right now.
I was muted. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're coming through loud and clear, Mark.
And can you see my screen now?
We can, and I can see the Adra-e Project.
Yes. Okay. So good morning, everybody. So I am Mark Schonauer, researcher at INRIA and scientific coordinator of the Adra-e Project that INRIA is coordinating. Philip mentioned Adra-e, so already briefly. So what is Adra-e? I'm going to present again very briefly, because Adra-e is some kind of operational arm of the partnership. Adra-e is a CSA, Coordinated Support Action, so a European instrument that was created to actually support the partnership that Philip mentioned, ADR partnership, ADR Robotic Partnership between the European Commission and ADRA, the association, ADR Association. Now you can see from their respective birth dates that probably ADRA needs more help than the European Commission in this partnership. And you can see also that ADRA was created for the purpose of running the private part of the partnership. In particular, it was born from scratch, almost naked, 1 month before the partnership was signed. So there is really a need to bootstrap the activities of the partnership. And that's why Adra-e was created and was funded. Adra-e is only running for 3 years, so it's really a bootstrapping initiative for the partnership, which will be running until 2030. Mainly, I will not come back to this objective of the partnership that Philip already mentioned. So, secure European sovereignty, establish the European leadership in ADR, and the strong global competitive position in ADR. Now, back to Adra-e. Adra-e has 13 partners, and there's a careful balance between AI data and robotics topics of activity of these partners, and as well as a balance between academia and industry. So again, Philip brilliantly explained why there's a need for this partnership, and AI data robotics is ubiquitous and will be absolutely crucial for the future of European economic life, technology, and so forth. However, and taking just one step back in history, you probably know that there were two partnerships before that, one in big data, run by the BDVA, one of the funding associations of ADRA, and the other in robotics. And it was the private part was EU Robotics, who is another partner, funding partner of ADRA. However, there are other people doing AI, and so this makes these three communities, AI, data, robotics, let's say, a bit sparse and a bit lack of lack of correlation, lack of links, and that's why also there's a need to help in unifying, in having common activities between these three sub-communities that we want to make one big community. To this goal, and to help ADRA to achieve its objectives, we have three main, let's say, pillars of activity in ADRA-e. One is around the SRIDA. The SRIDA, Strategic Research, Innovation and Deployment Agenda, was written prior to the signature of the partnership. It was the founding document of the partnership. However, it needs to be implemented and, of course, updated, because in ADR everything goes very fast, and that's one of the mission of ADRA-e. Then, as I mentioned, we need to really create inclusive, well, sustainable, effective, multi-layered and coherent also, but I want to insist on inclusive here, ecosystem involving all the communities of AI, data, and robotics. This is a mandatory condition to lead to a trustworthy ADR technology. And finally, we want to gather people, people, institutions, industries, and etc., in the partnership. And there's a need to raise the awareness about the ADR technology. And this event today is one step in this direction. So what are the means of ADRA-e to achieve these goals? Well, we have corresponding to these three objectives, we have three main activities. One around running with different brainstorming around the SRIDA. So again, to check about the implementation and help implementation and help the update of the SRIDA, and you will hear about it in all other activities. And important also activities about cartographies. As I said, the communities are very sparse and scarce, spread all around Europe, and very often doesn't even know what the others are doing in other countries or the other people in other domains and so forth. So there's a big activity in ADRA-e about building a cartography that has to be evolving, because, as I said, everything is going too fast now. And last but not least, and today is one of them, organizing events to help bringing together the different communities and to help other activities of ADRA-e. So to reach these goals, ADRA-e is organizing different work packages. I will briefly comment now. So first package is centered about having this convergence of communities and also giving recommendation to the update of the SRIDA, recommendation to ADRA, because ADRA is responsible and ADRA-e is, let's say, giving just recommendation here. Then the second work package is about, as I described already, the mapping of all the initiatives that exist in ADR in Europe and make them aware of one another. So this is some awareness, let's say, within the community. Work package 3 is one which is responsible for today's event, is about creating some awareness center where people can get fetch information about ADR technology. And as you will hear today also, the development of some AI trust label. Work package 4 is more about the support to, well, SMEs and at all levels, that's starting from the regional level, and in particular, organizing some sort of convergence summit to convince decision makers and stakeholders of their interest in joining ADR activities. An important aspect of technology development is standardization, and there's a full work package dedicated to standardization. And here again, it starts with a cartography of what already exists there. Well, then, of course, we have very important dissemination work package, and thank you to Society for organizing today's event, for instance. And then, of course, some project management, which is absolutely uninteresting. What about events? Because some events already took place, and you see that since the kickoff webinar of more than 1 year ago in July 2022, we had then a launch event of, let's say, 42 projects that just have been funded by the European Commission in ADR. So there were a big event in last October, 1 year from now. And there was also the first community event trying to gather together AI, data, and robotics communities around some general theme. Then we also had some, well, as you can see, shared research and innovation tools and platforms from automotive and mobility, which was within the EBDF. So that's big data forum last year, and some dedicated workshop around the SRIDA, the very first workshop, the 101 workshop, to start brainstorming around the update of the SRIDA and define who will do what and so forth. Then I mentioned the previous one, Louis mentioned on the slide, at EBDVF, Big Data Forum, about automotive, and there was also another session at the European Robotic Forum 23 in Odense about trying to define grand challenges around ADR. So we, of course, still act very closely with BDVA and EU Robotics. Then there was a very specific 3-day workshop last March about the impact of ADR on CO2 reduction, with some objective about prepare something about some convergence summit yet to come. Then in July, there was really a deep dive around the SRIDA with clear definitions of authoring process for the update of the SRIDA, a new version of the SRIDA, and it's now on the way. And finally, there was in September some roundtable about the SRIDA industry, again oriented toward the SRIDA. And future events, so I will be brief because Philippe already mentioned the most important one, but there is one again at EBDVF, the Big Data Value Forum next week, again around the SRIDA. So it's very important to have all the partners and all the sub-communities contribute to the SRIDA. But I will be very brief because Philippe already described it, the very important event, the forum, ADR Forum, 2 weeks to almost 3 weeks now near Versailles at INRIA headquarters. And the focus will be on European generative AI, which is a big trend at the moment, with different panels, with the first official public release of the SRIDA, the new SRIDA that I described very briefly the process of writing, and a series of workshops and roundtable. Oh, you have the names of a few speakers here, but again, you can just browse the website. Okay, thank you very much. And I'm stopping here to give you time for dedicated presentations and discussions. Oh, I don't know who's next.
We will have Professor Roberto next.
Okay, so I will share the screen. Can you see my presentation? Okay, perfect. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Roberta Calegari. I'm a professor here at the University of Bologna in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. And today I would like to present the final outcome that we recently had in the PREPI project. The PREPI project is a preparatory action for the AI on-demand platform, providing a sort of blueprint for further development of the platform. The AI on-demand platform, just to recall for the one that maybe the one that don't know, should be at least our one-stop shop for AI in Europe. So should be the entry point where innovators, researchers can go for tackling with AI. Of course, in this preparatory action, one of the main pillar to be discussed was trustworthiness, and so today I will talk about this. So the main question that we wanted to answer in this work was which kind of support mechanism are needed on the platform to ensure the trustworthiness of AI made in Europe. So this was an exercise of in terms of also of providing something really practical for ensuring trustworthiness. So we arranged the work around three main tasks. The first one was to take a look to the regulation, the regulatory landscape, and all the laws that comes into play when we want to ensure trustworthiness. Because as you know, trustworthiness is focused around three main pillars: lawfulness, robustness, and ethics. And the second task that we worked on was to really investigate the AI Act high-risk requirement and how they can be translated in some sort of support, which kind of support is needed to be compliant with this requirement. And finally, the third task was collecting the insight of these two previous tasks and was and developed a design of all the components that are really needed as support for ensuring trustworthiness. So with respect to the first task, what we saw is that actually the AI Act is a good base, and we need in particular to take into account really the specificity of each domain, but the AI Act alone is not enough because there are many national laws, many peculiarity related to each sector that comes into play and should be taken into account along with the AI Act. Then for answer the question, which kind of support, which kind of mechanism do we need to comply with the AI Act? We ran a deep dive analysis of some high-risk use cases, and this deep dive actually showed how the plethora of the mechanism should be different, also depending on the specific domain and sector at hand. So some of the outcomes, for instance, are that we need metrics. First of all, we need metrics for measuring trustworthiness. We need an environment where we can measure this kind of trustworthiness. We need standards because at this moment, we still don't have standards that we can rely on. So this is just a brief presentation to give you an idea of what would be needed in from a technical perspective for tackling trustworthiness, taking the feedback of the two previous tasks, we envisioned the needed component that we should put on the platform in order to guarantee the trustworthiness of all the AI assets that are uploaded or downloaded. And if we take a look to the component that we draw, actually, we can see that we have a cluster of 4 main components. We have some components that really need with the deal with the law and provide a sort of law matching in terms of AI Act, but also national laws and specific laws for the domain, for the sector that we are tackling. Then we have some components that are needed in order to understand the risk classification of the AI system that we are tackling, and along with these, we need some practical tool for dealing with the risk assessment procedure. And then what we need is, as we said before, some sort of experimentation environment, a really practical tool where the company, where the innovators, where the developer can measure and can assess the level of trustworthiness of their application, and see also the interplay of all the requirements of trustworthiness. So these are the main outcome, and also I want to stress that, first of all, not all the trustworthiness requirement can be measured. So this is also an issue that we have always to keep in mind. And so we cannot think that a tool can solve all the problem, but probably the human should be always in the loop. And the diversification in terms of support is needed. So we need the checklist, standard, as I said before, guidelines, and also tools for experimenting, for measuring, and so on. So the main outcome actually of this work that we made is that achieving trustworthiness is not an easy task. So it's a complex task, and we really need to work on this and to align possibly with the standard that has to come. So this is in a nutshell what we made and the main outcome of the project. Thanks a lot for the attention.
Thanks so much, Roberta. I believe it's Henry next.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Henry. I work at SystemX. It's a French industrial research center, and I'm going to share a single slide for a quick presentation. Okay. So I work in the Confiance.
Sorry, Henry, we can. Oh, okay. Now we can see your slide. Sorry. Yes.
Perfect. So I work in the Confiance.ai program in particular, and I coordinate there the standardization and label activities. So here is a slide about the Confiance.ai program to give you an idea. So it's a French industrial research program on AI trustworthiness. I think that's why it's interesting to discuss that today. And just for information, I also co-coordinated the Sentinel group of on AI trustworthiness last year. So Confiance.ai, so it's a French industrial research program. It's very collaborative. It was launched by 13 companies like Airbus, Valeo, Thales. It's quite industrial, but you see it also involves startups in some projects, and of course, many academics. It's a big project. It's 45 million euros with both public and private funds. We of course, we are divided into different tasks, and we cover different topics like, it can be AI engineering method and tools, robustness with the empirical methods, but it can also be robustness with the formal methods, explainability with this, some sense of psychology there. So it's not only engineering. Anomaly detection, NLP with small data attacks, evasion attacks, patch attacks. So it's very different topics. But what's important to note is that it's mainly technological R&D. So it's different from, the classic, from the fields of standardization and labeling that we are going to discuss today, although we have bridges with these fields. I may just note before talking about standardization and labeling that something interesting in the Confiance.ai program is, of course, the use cases shared by the different industries. So there is some scene understanding for cars. It's a Valeo use case. There is some trajectory use case from Airbus. There is some welding use case from Renault. So the use cases are very important to understand the problems and test solutions. So as I mentioned, it's mainly technological R&D, but we have bridges towards standardization and labeling. So it's it's the core of my function. And in particular, we are working with VDE, which is here today. Also IEEE and a French label called Positive AI, based in France initially. And we are all working together to see how the different specifications from each other and from VDE, IEEE, and Positive AI, how these specifications compared with each other. As an example, the label of Positive AI is more about organizations. We'll see that, I think in a minute, that the label initiated by VDE is more about system. Of course, there are strong links between these different specifications. When you check an organization, you look at the systems it operates. And when you check a system, you look at the organization which developed it. So there are strong links. There are also differences, and for example, in the format, some specifications are written as questions, some specifications are written as requirements, and that's something interesting to compare, because it's not only about it's not only cosmetics, it's not only about the format itself. It can have important consequences. There is a whole science behind the methods to specify what you need or what you want. There is a whole scientific field for that, because it's very easy to have missing information or misleading information, or information which can be understood in different ways. So there are interesting things to compare in the information provided by the different specifications, but also their formats. So we are doing this work together, and that's an important part of our job. And hopefully there will be and we'll see that, I think, in a minute, some interesting bridges with and interesting links with standardization from this work. And that's how I can summarize Confiance.ai.
Thank you. So yes, our next speaker is Andreas.
Do you already see the screen? Okay, yes, thank you. Okay, thank you for having me here. My name is Andreas Hauschke. I work at VDE, and I try to work on AI trustworthiness and to define what it means and how to achieve it. And I quickly present the AI trust label. The mission when we made the AI trust label was to try to make trustworthiness of AI measurable and not just talk about it, like make it actionable for companies, and also to help stakeholders to make an informed decision. Because usually when you look, for example, at an AI system, like you work with it, but you don't really know what's behind. So we try to bring it up to the surface so everybody can understand what are like some underlying principles behind the system. So to get acceptance, we think we needed to have an easy to understand representation, because when you throw like 500 pages documents at customers, they won't read it, they won't understand it, they want an easy representation. And that's why we got inspired by the energy efficiency label, which you see our possible representation on the left, where you can quickly see, okay, there was put much effort, for example, in accountability, not so much into fairness, and so on. Additionally, we thought the standard behind this needs to be open, so everybody can see what the label actually means, what are the underlying principles, how does it works, how to fill it out. So we agreed to make an open standard. And we also tried to make this standard as easy as possible to understand and easy as possible to work with. Because if something is tedious, it might also not be used. So we built on a tree structure. We call it VCIO with a questionnaire on the bottom. I will show it quickly because we don't have so much time. Like in the next slide. Then you may ask why you chose these 5 principles, and therefore we based it on scientific work. Also the European high-level expert group, which has similar principles, and also on the AI Act Article 4 and the amendments. Hopefully it will come in the final version, where it's defined the trustworthiness principles, which needs to be followed by all AI systems. And also, like the trust label, it can be used for all kinds of AI system. It is not limited to high-risk AI systems, but it can also be used there because the AI Act is just a yes, no, you can bring it to the market, but we want to give additional information. Also, to make it as easy as possible for everybody using the AI trust label, we strive for alignment with the AI Act and also the underlying harmonized standards, but also established standards and regulations. So for example, if you already comply to GDPR, you can put all the documents you filled out there, you can also use for the trust label. You don't need to do double work. And where does the label comes from? We developed it in a cooperation between industry, academia, and civil society, because we tried to involve as broad stakeholder as possible. And you can see the labels on the bottom. Just to show quickly the methodology, because before we can move on to the discussion. So actually, it's not quite hard. We have the so-called VCIO model. On the top, we have the trustworthiness principles, which are called values. Here, I have an example for transparency. And then you have like a tree structure. You have multiple criteria, which link to different properties of the AI system. And we, for example, look now in documentation of data sets. And this criteria also has multiple indicators where you, for example, ask if the origin of the data is documented or if like the characteristics of the data set were analyzed and documented. And there, behind this, you have a questionnaire where you can say, okay, yeah, I put a lot of effort in. I use the structured data sheet to document my data and every information is there. Then you would get an A. If you provided less information or done less stuff, you will get a lower grade. And this will then be aggregated to the higher level, so you get the score for the value. And therefore, I quickly show the trust label and hope we can start with the discussion.
Thank you so much, Henry, and thank you so much, Roberta and Andreas, for your insightful presentation. So it's almost time to start our first session. So our first session focuses on AI trustworthiness, and we particularly will discuss around self-regulation methods and techniques or mechanisms such as AI trust label and certification. I believe our speakers for panel 1 have already introduced themselves to you. So without further ado, let's get started with our very interactive and interesting first panel. So Ed, the floor is yours.
Great, Fatima. Thank you so much. And thanks for the great presentations. I'm just going to shout out to the participants in the webinar that if you want to ask a question, make sure you use the Q&A function in the webinar, and we'll take those as we go along. And again, to the speakers, Andreas, Henri, and Roberta, really interesting presentations and very much kind of focusing on big picture, specific tools, and also the kind of interaction between academia and industry. I'm going to start off with a question to Roberta, because the work that you've done is kind of really looked at applying this to a particular platform, and you've taken that bigger perspective of the requirements of the AI Act. If you were to step back and ask yourself, how are we doing on this journey towards AI regulation? What are your thoughts on that? How far are we towards successfully being able to do that?
Okay, thanks a lot for the question. Yeah, I think that a really good job has been done related to that. So we started with the ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI, and then starting from that now we are building this AI Act that I read in the draft, and I find very, very insightful. However, we need to fill a gap. We still need to fill a gap, because when we read this requirement, actually, we really need to find a way to practicalize them, to find a way to measure them, to find an easy way to make them understandable and measurable for innovators and companies. Otherwise, we still talk about something without being able to measure it, as Andreas was saying. So that gap needs to be filled, or we are really missing something. So this is a very good work, in particular in relation to the lawfulness of trustworthiness, but we need to do more.
Thanks, Roberta. I noticed on your slide, Roberta, you also highlighted some of this work can be automated, but a lot of it can't be. Do you have a sense of how much human intervention would be required to ensure that we have compliant systems? Do you think it's going to be high, or do you feel there's a big opportunity for potentially AI to help us regulate AI?
So I'm a computer engineering and an optimistic, okay? So I like to say really that AI can do a lot, and we shouldn't be scared of using AI. So we can regulate it, and we can exploit it for what AI is good for. So I really think that there is a great opportunity for automatizing stuff, for being able to go through this self-regulatory system that measure and can help. However, as I said before, requirements are many, and some are not so easily measurable. Also, the explainability, the transparency that Andrews was talking before, sometimes is not easy to understand what an explainable system means. So an explanation for who. So the human in the loop, I think that is still needed.
That's great, Roberta. Thank you. I'm going to move over to Henri and to talk about the collaborations that you've had. You've been working extensively with industry, seems to be large and small industry. I kind of give the same question to yourself. Where do you think we're at in this journey?
When I started to think about this, about today's program, I thought in detail about the notion of self-regulation. I may want to distinguish different concepts here. So there are regulations which are mandatory. There are good practices that you can apply voluntarily, like for labels. And whether we are talking about something mandatory or voluntary, it can either be self-assessed or assessed by a third party. So when we talk about self-regulation, we have to think about, so are we talking about something voluntary or mandatory, and is it self-assessed or assessed by a third party? Regarding the regulation, mandatory for specific system and high-risk systems, something to note is that it's quite changing. There are still some uncertainties around the AI Act. Something very good is that we now have a reference, a kind of backbones, and we use it a lot in our work with VDE and our other partners. So that's something good, but we have to keep in mind that it might be changing, even in particular with the coming elections, for example. Regarding the labels, so that's a kind of different point of view. We try to have companies follow it for different reasons, just because they need good practices, when they face these new technologies where they cannot follow the classic processes, whether it's to have a competitive advantage, whether it's to show their employees and their customers that they follow some good values and good principles. So they have different options that they have different reasons to follow labels. But it's still not, there is also here some uncertainty on how much companies will follow the labels voluntarily for these different reasons.
And just kind of looking at that, does that pose a challenge then in terms of self-regulation where there's uncertainty about who will follow it versus third-party auditing? That would seem to be a big challenge for us. What level do we have between both? Do you have any sense of where that might go between?
So we start to have a sense on that. Maybe Andreas can complete or there is a question of who will follow the labels, because sometimes very big companies, IT companies, may not be very voluntary because they already have good processes that they consider already good, and they have already their own solutions. Google works on its own processes. So small companies may have some reasons not to follow, because if they don't launch a product, they die. So maybe if they launch a product, they will still die because because of some trustworthiness issues. But anyway, if they don't launch the product, they still die. So they have some different priorities. They might want to take the risk to launch the product anyway. And then there is a question of the companies in between. So there is this question for labels.
Okay, so I think that's a lovely segue to move over to Andreas, and just to remind participants, please stick your questions into the Q&A because we'll come to those after this. So Andreas, there's you've identified the VDE label. They're a very concrete tool that actually helps organizations start to explain and to communicate what kind of trustworthy systems that they have. There's a lot of challenges here, like in terms of the certified mandatory requirements versus the self-regulation requirements. What's your kind of experience and what's your perspective on that? You'd like to add to it?
Yeah, I could say what Henry said again, like just because it's not mandatory from the law, you could also do an audit like we're now discussing. Maybe, for example, if you claim to be very trustworthy, for example, an A in our label, that you will also need a third-party audit. And we try in the future maybe build an alliance around it, like, for example, that controls everything. So it will also be audited, likely, the label. What I want to add is like what I said before. The thing is, like, the AI Act just has regulation for high-risk systems, and they are just a yes/no. Like, you just have like, it's safe enough for the European market, but you don't get additional information for customers. And the thing is, we think, especially when you look to the current development of AI, that the possibilities are so big, and maybe the definition of harm or what can go wrong about the system is maybe a bit broader than just the yes/no, it's safe enough decision. Because the AI Act does not really look about, for example, third-order effects. And we think trust level is needed and will be demanded by users to see more than just this yes/no decision. And additionally, we want to allow people and users to make this informed decision. I think I need to explain this more. for example, you have two systems, they are safe regarding the AI Act, but then you want to say, okay, I want the system that is more privacy preserving, for example. Right now, you just could look at marketing material, but with the AI Trust Label, you would have additional information, and then you can make an informed decision that you will look for example, the more privacy preserving and not, for example, the so reliable system. You can make your own decision. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But before we dive into that user side, we'll say the non-expert user side, I'm going to go back to a question I asked to Roberta about automation. So if I understand with VDE, it's a questionnaire-based tool initially. Do you see there's an opportunity for automation of a trust label? Or do you see this as being something that's very much kind of driven by the designer and the human?
So we are already checking which of the questions can be automated. So hopefully we will can announce something there in the somewhat near future. So
Okay.
I think regulatory can be tackled also with AI, but I need to agree not everything can be automated. Then still need to be a human involved in the design and also in the documentation.
Okay, great. So I'm really kind of hearing there is significant opportunity for us to try to leverage AI and other techniques in trying to provide tools and supports to simplify compliance or regulation. That's a really nice point. And another question for you, Andreas. So the kind of AI landscape is changing so rapidly. From the point of view of somebody who's building a tool with a community of users, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to do that. How will you kind of keep up with the developments in AI in terms of new technologies and new challenges in the scope of the label? Do you think that will be a constant thing where we see the label maybe updating every couple of years to look at new factors, or do you think it's going to be something that's relatively stable once it's defined?
Okay. Yeah, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. It's generative AI. So I think regarding regulation and also the trust labels, I think we need to distinguish, I would say, between classical AI, for example, like computer vision, which is used, for example, in autonomous driving or quality assurance, and generative AI. And I think we also see it in the AI Act. I think the part, for example, for the classical AI is very stable. But the part about generative AI is still evolving quick, because there's a really a thing that separates these two AIs. And it's that, for example, the classical AI, it has an intended purpose, and then you can test all around this intended purpose. But generative AI right now, by definition, does not have an intended purpose. And this needs to make us really think them parts new. But also I want to say, like, regarding development, there are some principles. I think the trustworthiness principles in general won't change. The generative AI still needs to be transparent. It still needs to be privacy preserving. But what it means actually to measure it, for example, for generative AI, it is a bit different. And therefore, I think we should not be scared of like updating standards. We just need to have like strong institutions that are able to update these standards.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point about the not necessarily having a design specific intended use for generative AI. That openness of it is the power of it, but that creates the challenge as well. Fabulous. So I'm going to jump to an audience question. It's a really interesting one from Johanna Wirtz from Aachen University, and it's pointed towards Roberta here. So Johanna is a psychologist who's researching the usage of transparent systems, and they kind of looked at Roberta's mention of having humans to be kept in the loop. And the question is basically wondering that, Roberta, are you involving humans in your research? And what does that mean for you? So maybe if you want to respond to that, I think it's quite interesting. And Andreas, I think this is probably relevant to you as well. We might let you jump in after as well.
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Joanna, for the question, because this is one of the main points. So I think that we cannot, as a computer engineering, computer scientists, we cannot tackle trustworthiness alone. So we really need to build multidisciplinary teams where we have lawyers and we have social science involved. So this is our way of working, for instance. And the methodology that we are following when we are going to build this system also for measuring and ensuring trustworthiness. For instance, I'm working in a project that I'm coordinating that is going to tackle fairness in AI. So we follow a participatory design methodology that I think is the methodology that now is kind of widely recognized, and we need to follow when we build an AI system. What is the participatory design methodology? Is a methodology that involves, since the preliminary stage of the design of AI system, all the stakeholders that will be involved in the decision of this system. So this is exactly what I mentioned before and what Joanna has mentioned. How can I say that the explanation is good enough? Good for who? The decision should be, I don't know, in the healthcare domain, for instance, the explanation of an AI decision should be good for a doctor, a patient. So we really need to tackle all these differences, and we can do these with this kind of participatory methodology. However, there can be different kind of explanation that are, for instance, for the technical person, that are for understanding bugs of the system, that can be enough. But this is something that we need to approach in this wide way of working, I think.
That's great, Roberta. And I'm just going to jump over to Andreas as well. So in the work on the VDE label, one, have you engaged users in that to kind of get feedback? And then the second part of the question then kind of talks about, have you looked at, the perception that the label might have for different user groups and the possibility for people to be perceiving very different information from what's been trying to be communicated?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I try to separate the question.
Yeah.
One is like in the development of the trust label itself. Yes, we tested it with different kind of stakeholders, and we try to make the testing even broader in the near future. But the other part is like, and I think also Roberta was talking about this one, is, for example, if you talk about accountability or transparency or also fairness, you talk with the people that are affected by the AI system when you develop a system for which you want to get an AI trust label. And there, we try to include stakeholders. So, for example, when you want an A level in fairness, you need to involve the affected persons. You need to talk with them and base the design of the system on the feedback of the affected person. That would be for an A, but you don't need an A. So when you want like the highest category, you need to involve persons and get their feedback. And I think additionally, we also need to say, like, for example, Gen AI is quite new for us, but we all played around. And I think when the technology is more widespread, people will start to find out how to work with it. For example, right now we all say keep in mind that it can hallucinate, but I think like in 1 year everybody had learned, okay, yeah, AI systems are hallucinating, and then we will figure out how to work with these systems.
Okay, fabulous. And from the point of view of perception, do you think do you think that the VDE approach is kind of, because it's you've kind of broken it down to the very, very simplest kind of communication mechanism, like, like energy labels. Do you think that that's a fairly broad metaphor to be communicating?
Okay, yeah. So actually, because the standard is open, you can break down the label as much as you want. Okay. Like the energy efficiency part was the one that is displayed, I don't know, on the marketing material. But if you want, you can look deeper into the levels and get the information depth that you want. So it's like I would say, modular approach, where you can, how much you are interested, how the more deeper you can dive in.
That's fabulous. So the notion of progressive disclosure, you can give more and more details. People are more and more interested. Fabulous. That's great, Andreas. Thank you very much. So we're kind of coming up to the end of our session here. So I've got another, if there's any last questions from the audience, please ping them in. But I have one more question myself, at least for Henry. Henry, you mentioned in your talk a number of standardization bodies that you work with, IEEE, SENS, NLEC. I'm curious, and you've started to do some of the kind of early work to see, well, what's the difference between the tools that are there? What do you feel are kind of the next steps that we need to take from kind of a standardization point of view over the next, we'll say, kind of 12 to 36 months, like the next 1 to 3 years? What are the kind of steps you think we need to make?
That's a very good question. Can I add one more thing regarding the perception of the label?
Please.
It's hard not to add that. So an interesting challenge, just in one word, is the fact that different systems may not need the same requirements. Some you don't have the same requirement for a toy or for something a bit more sensitive. So would the toy have an F grade? If it's enough. Maybe not F or D grade, if it's enough, but how would it be perceived? Would the consumer understand that D is enough, or would he consider that it's not a good grade? So that's an interesting perception challenge. Regarding the roadmap for labels and standardization, there is so these two fields are both similar and very different. Something very good is that labels are quite agile. There are different initiatives. That's why we now try to work with different initiatives to avoid fragmentation, because that's actually something to deal with. As there are different initiatives, we should avoid the fragmentation and try to improve the visibility of good solutions. In standardization, so the purpose is quite similar, defining good practices, but it's more constrained. First, it's constrained by the regulation, which is still changing. It's also constrained by maybe more rules, regarding the scope of each standard, regarding political issues which are raised in standardization. So a big challenge will be to strengthen the link between the results of labeling and standardization.
Okay, no, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. And I think we are pretty much on time. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank Roberta, Henry, and Andreas for your presentations, your fantastic thoughts, and your contributions. A quick shout out to Fatima for organizing the session as well. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Katrina and to Frederick for the next panel. Bye.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. First panel was extremely interesting. Katerina Linden from Linköping University here, and I will be quick presenting our second panel. Our second panel is called AI Externalities. It is related to the research we are doing at Linköping University right now, looking at stakeholders involved in the implementation and development of AI, data, and robotics-driven technologies. We need to see all good and bad practices, opportunities, challenges, or positive and negative externalities surrounding the development of these technologies. And to do it, we need to talk to experts. I want to introduce our panel. It is Rafia Inam, Head of Trustworthy AI at Ericsson, Adjunct Professor at Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden. Josephine Rosen, Trustworthy AI Specialist at SAS Institute, Sweden. And Colin van Noort, expert on the use of AI within public services at Taltech, Estonia. And now I'll hand the floor over to our esteemed moderator, Professor Frederick Heinz, who will guide us in this discussion. Frederick?
Thank you very much, Katerina, for the introduction, and welcome everyone to this second panel. As Katerina said, we will here focus more on some sense the promises, but also the challenges that we need to overcome in order to really leverage the value and potential of ADR technology. So my first question is more about the possibilities and the things that you see going forward. So from your perspective, what are the major groundbreaking applications that is relevant to you that you anticipate to emerge from AI, data, and robotics in the coming year or two? And I will let each of you briefly address the question. So I will start with Rafia, please.
Thank you so much. Very nice introduction speeches, I would say, and very good panel discussion on the one. I work on trustworthy AI, and then, yes, AI is transforming the world. We see it around many applications, and telecom is no exception from that perspective as well. We say that automation and AI are like integral part to our telecom. And the first thing is that the complexity of the networks is increasing, and it is beyond human control now. With when we move to the 5G network slicing and the management of the network slicing, dynamic allocation of the resources, configuration of the networks. So to solve all these problems, I think AI play an important role there with automation. We are like, AI can accurately pinpoint us the root causes of the problem, and sometimes we just predict that the problem will occur, and then we analyze that where the problem will occur, and then we present a solution or recommend a solution to the humans to manage the networks in proactive way, which was traditionally very reactive. This is one thing. Then performance boost is another advantage where we see AI plays an important role by managing the complexity, improving customer experience. Like AI has the possibility to analyze the network traffic patterns, optimize resource allocations. It can boost the throughput and increase the reliability of the network. Another thing is like optimizing routing of the data so that we can reduce the congestion, so it can improve the bandwidth and latency requirements. And to meet all those challenges, AI has a significant role there. It is increasing like new possibilities basically for us.
Thank you. So it seems to be exciting times in the telecom industry, that basically providing the infrastructure on which to actually build all these interesting and valuable applications. So Colin, if we then go towards the, I guess, private sector public sector, and from your perspective, working with Estonia, for example, what do you see as the big things on your radar coming up now?
Yeah, so I think it's a very good question, because also, whereas on the one hand, there's all these developments going on, and you do see a lot of public sector organizations, including Estonia, at the forefront of interest of using AI in certain ways. At the same time, you see it's struggling also very much. So public sector struggling with actually implementing, integrating, adopting these technologies, right? So a more cynical take can be, for every talk where they're announcing things that they will do, how much actually happens is very minimal, because there's so much complexity, and also the internal knowledge on these AI-related concerns is very scarce. So there's a lot of reliance on external actors, which can help to a certain extent, but in the end, it also has to come from within the administrations, and this is still an ongoing process. So whereas the technology will keep on bringing out new big things, public sector is still struggling very much to even get started with the early. I mean, I heard already some other expressions on the simple AI or the simple things. For them, that's the complex one still, right? So even just doing a chatbot is already a remarkable achievement for most public administrations. So there's still, the next big thing would be, let's get some stuff actually done.
So there, I'm curious, as a follow-up question, do you see that kind of the big kind of flash around ChatGPT, have that changed things working with the public sector, or do you see that it's kind of been a gradual development?
Well, it depends a bit what angle you're looking at, right? So the bang of ChatGPT definitely, again, I mean, I've seen it a few times, caused this buzz. Oh, wow, look at what's happening and we should do something about it. But 9 out of 10 times the discussion is about how, as a government, regulate, how do we regulate this technology? How do we make sure that it has no harms on society? You should check how many these discussions are about how can we as governments make the most use of this technology by ourselves, right? So within our own administrations, then the number goes down significantly. So also in terms of experimenting with ChatGPT, it is ongoing, but I would say definitely not in the same extent as companies or us even as individuals are experimenting with ChatGPT. So there's still, yeah, this hesitancy, I would also say, maybe for good. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of questions to be asked, but it's definitely a different buzz than asking the question, how can we use this for our own good, in a sense too, right? It's mostly about how can we mitigate the harms.
Thank you. Yeah, we will get back to the challenges coming forward, but I would like to also leave the floor to you, Josephine. So I guess you will provide a kind of also a bit of public sector and healthcare perspective from a large service provider. So please, what's your expectations on the technology going forward?
Yes, thank you, Fredrik, for the introduction. And yeah, I work as a trustworthy specialist in the SAS Institute Global Data Ethics Practice, and that work is cross-industry, so I will respond from that perspective. And you know, the pace of development in the field of AI right now is so incredibly rapid. So in the next 2 years, to be honest, I would probably anticipate more groundbreaking applications emerging than we have seen in the last 2 decades, right? But like most of us, I assume I expect the most revolutionary applications in the near future to come from the generative AI space. For instance, where, you know, a very qualified guess would be that we will see a lot more integrations with large language models. We're already starting to see how these are changing, you know, how we interact with both data and systems, something that has, for instance, fantastic impact in education. Then models like ChatGPT are very general purpose. I call them models that want to be everything for everyone. But here I expect a transition towards taking advantage of the amazing advancements that we've seen in this field lately by integrating them into applications that are tailored to be very specific, you know, very specific needs and very specific tasks. Generative AI in general has enormous potential across numerous fields. We all realize that, right? But if I were to emphasize one area here, I would probably say healthcare and pharmaceutical research. I would expect not only improved and faster diagnostics, which of course is super important for timely medical interventions, but also more efficient and successful drug discovery processes using generative methods that potentially could lead to new therapies and treatments. So to make a long story short, looking ahead, I believe in more strategic integration of generative AI innovations into practical applications. And I believe this will transform industries and enhance quality of life, hopefully, and also address some of the most pressing challenges that we face today.
Thank you. So a follow-up question I'm curious about is, it seems to me that the current trend is that we see more and more kind of advanced applications providing some kind of co-pilot function, some form of assistant, but basically built into that tool and specialized for that tool. Is that also something that you are exploring, considering that you are a service provider providing these kind of tools to your customers?
Yeah. I mean, we actually had our large user event just a few weeks ago, and you know, what we're introducing there is together with, you know, we're not providing, for instance, our own large language models, but we're partnering with Microsoft there to integrate that in everything, like so that you can talk to Model Studio on how to build a model for you, or you can talk to the code generator that generates code for you, or these sort of building things into what we already have. That is definitely a big thing for us right now.
Interesting. So thank you very much for that. So now we're moving into next questions, which is then more about the obstacles. So what is the kind of current challenges that you need to overcome in order to realize these applications and to kind of realize this potential that you're mentioning? So I will let you think about the questions slightly, and in the meantime, I will also ask encourage the audience to also provide questions to our panelists. So if you have questions, please provide them, and we will try to bring them up. So after that short intermission, I will now ask you, Rafia, so from your perspective, integrating this kind of technology in the telecom networks and really bringing this to your customers, what are the challenges?
Yeah, good question. AI adoption is a challenge. We clearly see it inside the company as well, and outside when we go to the AI with our AI infused products to the customers as well. Trust is one aspect. I will come to trust afterwards. The first thing, like what we need to for AI, we need data. This is the first thing. Okay, so right data at the right time is needed. The quality of the data is important, and then there comes the question from the trustworthiness of the data aspects. It should be fair. It should not be biased. It should not discriminate anyone. So these are all the questions which are related to the data. So right data at the right time is needed for the AI. Traditionally, built products over the many decades were not based to gather all the data and that part. So I think it is not just the telecom that is facing this challenge, it's the overall our challenge, that part. Then comes privacy and security aspects. And I think in privacy and security, in general, we are quite good, especially in Europe with the GDPR rules are applied. So we are taking care of that part when it comes to the data. When it comes to the telecom data specific, then it is a bit less privacy related, because most of our data comes from just the equipment and the routers and this part. So unless the customer data is usually with our communication service providers or the operators, so Ericsson don't own that data explicitly. Then there is another challenge with the AI is the life cycle management of the models, when to update the models in the system, when to upgrade the models. Models will be retrained on the new data in the real world. They will be deployed in the real networks, and what data is coming there and how to handle that part, when to retrain the model, when to update the new model. All these are the questions to us. And then when it comes to the trustworthy AI aspect, then I would like to share. Do you see my screen now?
Yes, not in presentation mode, but I see it.
Yes, why Ericsson needs trustworthy AI. So these are like the trustworthy aspects, because I work on trustworthy, so this is close to my heart, basically. So we need the trustworthiness. We think that trustworthy AI and going on that part will go hand in hand to enable the customer trust as well for us. So we want to make sure that AI and our models are doing the right thing in the right way, and we ensure that they are doing the correct things. The AI models, we must be able to explain why AI model made a certain decision or how it arrived at certain decisions. Maybe all the details cannot be shared with the end customer, but at least for our understanding and the fairness, we need that level of detailed transparency inside the company. Then AI models should be safe, robust, right data at the right time. I already explained, I think, both these aspects. And then most importantly, we must be compliant with all the AI ethics guidelines and regulations and the upcoming standards, etc. And this also helps us a lot in discovering the new behavior, basically, when we move our models from our simulated environments to the test beds, and then from the test beds to the new network, new data models get trained. And then this helps us to understand the behaviors of the models. And then I want to just say in the end that Ericsson is compliant. Ericsson has adopted EU ethics guidelines 2019. We don't provide own guidelines or requirements like other big companies provide. We just follow the EU ethics guidelines. And of course, we will comply to the upcoming AI Act as well.
Thank you. So, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of interesting work going on here, and hopefully you can also provide support, I mean, for your customers to make sure that their the applications that they build on top of your networks is then also compliant. And I think there's that sounds very, very promising. So going now over to you, Colin, and again, going back more to the public sector, you already mentioned some of the, I mean, that it seems like the challenges are both different and maybe also to some degree larger when it comes to this public sector perspective. So can you please try to enlighten us what are the major blockers and what are the challenges that we need to address here?
Yes, and I mean, this is a question I asked myself also during my whole doctorate thesis. So I also should try to limit it to a few factors, because there are a lot, and also it depends a bit also what is the phase that we are talking about, right? Are we talking about barriers that these public sector organizations face when we want to start? Want to develop something, just to begin an innovation. So there are already some issues there in terms of the willingness, or even simply the awareness of what AI could mean for them. This is often not there, or it is so superficial, right? They think about killer robots or self-driving cars, not necessarily things that are applicable to their own context. So that's already part one. But then if you want to move forward into more the adoption related barriers, so it's very similar to what was just discussed too, right? There's issues of legal barriers and sometimes very trivial things, right? They can be just some small law that says, well, you need a paper form, or you need a signature, or I saw in Japan, for instance, they still had floppy disks as a legal requirement, right? So if that is still there, you can build the most fantastic system, but it will not be adopted, right? So these kind of issues, but also very well, technical things, like often there's no good technical infrastructure available, or that they are allowed to use, right? So cloud computer is a solution for the private sector, but many public organizations are not allowed to use that. So, well, how do you train your staff? Data sharing, right? You can go on and on and on about these technical factors that are limited, but also very trivial things. There's simply no funding. There's no money. There's no people who can do it. There might be just a manager who doesn't like technology. So, well, you know, then it stops very quickly. But also even then, and that was something that I found as well with most of the researchers, even if there was a small pilot or a small test, they made something and it's very interesting, to implement it on a longer basis gets even more tricky, right? So some of these factors that may be overcome at the pilot because it's exceptional, right? You have a special status, they then hunt you back in a later phase, right? So, oh, maybe the data was not so good after all. We had money for funding, but not for maintenance, right? This life cycle model, well, I've seen it too, right? They don't, there's no capacity for that. So there are a lot of different elements, and most of them are not technological. And I think that is a very important question, a point to take also to people watching. Like, most of these things are not technological barriers. There are some, don't get me wrong, but these are in a sense easier to solve than the other ones.
So one thing I'm always kind of curious, I mean, trying to, I mean, I of course realize, or I mean, yeah, can, I mean, these kind of concerns that you bring up has been brought up many times, but sometimes I try to push it towards the alternative costs. So I'm curious, I mean, are there any discussions? Yes, of course, there are these costs involved. Yes, there are these kind of technical challenges, but on the other hand, if we don't provide good healthcare to our citizens, if we cannot have a kind of competitive environment for our companies, and if we cannot provide very good education and so on, then of course the alternative costs would be very high.
Yeah.
Are there any such discussions?
Yes. So and that's also part of the problem, right? So it also has to do. Well, I mean, it's a bit a cynical take, but who then benefits from this? And if administration X spends X million on implementing an AI system, but the results are for someone else, they don't necessarily see that in their budget. And that it's a perverse incentive to sometimes not do things. It doesn't always occur, of course, don't get me wrong. I've seen this, but it's also, it's a matter of the funding capabilities, right? So I've seen also systems, I have plenty of examples, but one was related to something was addressed before, understanding customer journey. Well, citizens, you can also understand their complaints. You can use information from the call data, topic modeling, etc. I've seen it being piloted. The problem was it was so expensive for them to keep doing that. There was so many costs involved. So they didn't see it as worth it because also getting that financial or maybe a clear picture on the positive impact it's maybe more difficult to materialize for a public administration. So yeah, then you only see, well, it costs you this much money and the effects are somewhere down the line. And I fully agree with you, you should still do it. But in that moment, it is very sometimes not always easy to justify these changes.
Yeah, no, it's always a challenge to kind of measure the right things so that you get the correct incentives. So thank you very much for that perspective. So Josephine, from your perspective, what are the major challenges that you are currently facing?
Well, the key to any sustainable AI application, as I see it, is trust, like also Rafael mentioned, and right now that is unfortunately lacking to a large extent in our society when it comes to AI innovations. I think way too many people are scared of AI today, and they're worried about the fast development that we're seeing right now in the generative AI space. We definitely need to do something about that to help citizens trust AI and feel comfortable with the rapid advancements that we're witnessing today. One thing that I believe is standing in the way here is the obvious lack of transparency and explainability. And I believe to trust an AI system, most of us want to understand the reasoning behind its outputs to at least some extent, depending on, of course, what it is that we're using it for. We need to be able to judge the safety and the reliability of the AI systems that we're using. And there are a lot of great methods available to interpret the outcomes of complex models today, which is great, but unfortunately, many of the new generative AI-related innovations like large language models are still black boxes in many ways still. Then general obstacle that is addressed by upcoming legislations, which is good, is a lack of solid AI governance frameworks in many organizations. Not only lack of transparency, but also traceability throughout the AI lifecycle, from the question through data management, through model development and deployment and until the outcome. It's not enough to just have a good, fair model that, of course, would have been trained on good data at the time of deployment, because models need to be aligned with the present at all times. And the present is something that is changing all the time. So we need governance frameworks that cover the entire AI lifecycle. So to summarize what I said, I guess AI-driven outcomes must be, I guess, repeatable. They need to be governed. They need to be transparent and interpretable. And for some of these new systems like the large language models, we still have some work to do in this department, I believe, before we can truly realize those applications.
So do you think that this ADR trust label that was presented here earlier today, is that a step in the right direction? Is that something that can at least partially address these concerns about transparency and traceability and these things?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, there going to be a need for a comprehensive approach. I can come back to that a little bit later, but I think, we need to both look at technology that can enable trust, but also, processes and people to do this. I think it's something that we need to work with from many different perspectives.
Thank you. So we have a question from the audience, and that's related to the sustainability of these, these large models, and of course also the need for scarce resources to be used in development. So Rafia, maybe you can address this from an Ericsson perspective. So how do you see this sustainability aspects and dealing with scarce resources and the like?
Yeah, good question, I will say. Very interesting topic. It is, and when we see that the needs of the infrastructure needs for the AI were increasing, we were seeing it from last decades. It was the question which was raised years ago when the AI computer beat the Go game leader, Lee Sedol. And then we were there were questions of comparison of the energy used by the AI systems as compared to how much mind energy was required, and how much comparison of that okay, AI system beat it, but with how much more energy needs and where those energy will come. So these are all the valid questions, and these are like at our humanity level. And now when we see that when this Gen AI, the infrastructure needs are gone beyond scale. Even when I talk with academia and researchers, then they say, oh, Gen AI is the game of the big companies because of the infrastructure needs. You, like a normal people, how can they use unless the companies provide them the platforms or the resources needed for that part? So I think this is a challenge, and I agree with that question. And we all, I think, need to take the responsibility of that part. You was relating the question with the responsible AI. So when we, if we go really by definition, the responsible AI means that when we use AI, it must behave responsibly. But sustainability is a question which is always there and which we all apply to. At Ericsson, when we work on when we looked at sustainability, energy management is a key aspect. It is a need of our customers, and being a responsible company, we also work on that. And then when it comes to AI, we try to work on those models which are energy efficient, where we don't need a very high or big model. If we can use a smaller model which can use less energy, then it is the best solution for us and for also our customers. But the challenge is still on the table, and we all need to work on it. I will say we are on the journey. We have not solved the problem.
No, I think
we cannot ignore it as well.
I think that's a very good summary. And I also understand that, you're using this AI technology really to make your networks more energy efficient, and basically using the resources that you already have much more efficiently. So I think there is also this kind of counterbalance that it's not only using resources, but also helping us to get more value out of the same amount of resources. So I guess it's a balancing act here to make sure that the positive aspects outweigh the negative ones. So our final questions, the last minute or two here, is all about, I mean, now we talked about the opportunities, the challenges. So what are what would you like to see? So in some sense, if you get to wish, or I mean, what are the things that you really would like to see being addressed that will really help in overcoming these challenges? So Raphael, do you want to start?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I can take that part. And I think my previous response to the Sustainability and Balancing Act is the first thing. And we are working on that part, of course. But then other than that, I think I would like to relate this a bit to like some time ago, there was this open letter. I think you all will be aware of that, to halt the AI systems, and it was from the big names working on the AI, that AI may take control over the humans or whatever. So there are threats, or there are, I will say not threats, but mostly the fears to all of us, that people are a bit fearful what the AI can do. So I think my personal view is that technology is not harmful. It is the use of the technology, or the effect of the technology, which can be harmful if it goes in the hands of people with some bad intentions. So it is the use of the technology, and for that, I think the regulatory aspects go hand in hand together with the AI development. So when we should develop and then deploy our AI systems in the practical field, in the real world, we must make sure it is our responsibility that we comply to the regulatory aspects. I understand that the regulations are not there yet, but we are moving forward with respect to the regulatory bodies. Like in 2019, this European Commission guidelines, and then the assessment list documents came up, and I think that the AI Act will be finalized sometime end of this year, or maybe early next year. So we must strongly comply to all those governance and the regulations. And second point I really want to make here is that we can move forward together as a society. The government bodies cannot just make the governments, cannot make the regulations or laws on one hand. They should make the laws and regulations together with the big companies, together with the researchers, to understand properly the threat and then the proposed mitigation risk, and we all must comply to that point.
Thank you. So we are getting very close to the end there, but I still wanted to give you, Colin and Josephine, some quick remarks. I mean, what would you like to see going forward here, Colin?
Yes, I'll keep it brief then. So I think what is moving forward, what I would really like to see is, I mean, it touches upon very many things that were just before, but I think what is also very crucial is to focus a bit more on also what already is needed, right? So the phrase, there is still no AI regulation, there is hundreds of regulation that also regulates AI, but it's often ignored. So a lot of the scandals, a lot of the failures we see now with AI are the result of not following existing laws, like the GDPR, like, well, there's also local legislation or whatever. So we should also take in mind what is already there, and not treat AI too much as a new thing. It is just another technology that falls under laws that we had before, and that needs also proper enforcement and inspection. So there's still actual humans need to do the work, right? So we should not forget the people.
Thank you, Josephine.
Yeah, just like, I guess, my two panel friends here, I believe legislations will, set a framework that can promote innovative approaches to provide, to the large extent, missing transparency for especially many other generative AI systems and large language models that I talked about earlier has. And then naturally also following that, I believe legislation will foster trust. And the goal of the AI Act, for instance, is after all to ensure that that AI is human-centric and that it is trustworthy. Then, I mean, if legislation could also contribute to that, organizations get solid governance frameworks in place, that would be great. They would then, ultimately have traceability and transparency throughout the AI lifecycle, from, like I said, the initial questions asked through data management, development, deployment, and all the way to the final outcomes. And most of what would be needed for that is available today. But like I said, there are some gaps when it comes to the more complex new methods. And finally, I would also like to add, I'm convinced that building trust becomes easier when we stick to strong values that are based on the essential principles. And what is seen as fair or ethical could be so different across context and across organizations and even nations. So to agree on what is fair for you and your organization and setting those principles is a work that is necessary and that I would recommend every organization to do as a first step on the trustworthy AI journey. And if you then make sure that this is also reflected in your people, in the way you operate, and as well as in your technology, then I believe that you have come a long way towards trustworthiness.
Thank you very much. So I would like to thank all three of you for your valuable contributions. And thank you very much to the audience. So what you have seen here today is that there's a tremendous potential in this AI data and robotics technology. We see that a value-based approach following the strong regulations that is being developed here in Europe is the way to go forward. And of course, there is still a lot of innovation and excitement work to be done in order to realize this potential. And Adra is, of course, here to really help collect and organize the community, but really pushing the technology and making sure that we in Europe are both developing this technology, but we're also using it so that we can really benefit from this together and make sure that society is progressed and that we can solve the important challenges that we are facing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.